Hi everybody, my name's Kylene Rooks and I work with Durham Soil and Water Conservation District, and I'm here to talk to you today about what it means to live in a watershed. So exactly, what is a watershed? A watershed is an area of land where all of the water falling on it or running underneath it is draining to the same spot. There are four types of falling water or precipitation: snow, sleet, hail, and rain. And water flowing underground is called groundwater. The boundaries of a watershed are defined by the contours or the shape of the land, the hills, the valleys, and the slopes, and when water falls, it makes its way from the point of where it fell to the lowest point in the watershed due to gravity and these contours. In a healthy watershed, all the land, trees, and other plants act as a sponge, using their roots in the soil to absorb rainwater when it falls, and finally allowing the land to slowly release it back into the streams, the creeks, and the rivers. Without these soil or plant root systems in place, water runs too quickly off the land and creates other problems like flooding. So exactly who lives in a watershed? We all live in a watershed. Even Durham Soil and Water is in a watershed. We're in the Ellerby Creek watershed. The Ellerby Creek watershed, or the watershed that you live in, is where you play and do all of your recreation and have fun during the warm summer months. But even that water then flows to an even lower point, Falls Lake. And Falls Lake is where many of us get our drinking water. And then from there, the water in Falls Lake flows even further downriver into the Neuse River, which then connects with 5 other rivers into the Pamlico Sound estuary. And an estuary is a combination of salty and fresh water. And that makes sense, right? Because it's right along the coast, right before the water that started in Ellerby Creek makes its way to the Atlantic Ocean. Now, why should we care? How do we benefit from a healthy watershed? Some of the ways that we benefit from a healthy watershed feel really obvious, like clean drinking water and healthy fish and wildlife habitat, right? So we want to make sure that not only we're drinking safe water, but the fish and other food that rely on the river or on the creek and other parts of the watershed remain healthy too. Some less obvious ways is that we need a healthy watershed so that we have clean water that irrigates our crops that later become food that makes its way to our dinner table. We also want to make sure that we have a safe recreation space, that the waters that we're swimming and canoeing and kayaking and fishing in are all healthy, and that way we don't make ourselves sick by swimming in the water. So how do our actions and the actions of other people affect the health of the watershed that you live in? Sometimes, if we get a lot of rain all at once, the land can't soak up all of that water fast enough. And that means the water that is running off of our roofs and our driveways and the parking lots and our roads end up picking up lots of sediment or loose dead soil and other pollutants on its way. So have you ever noticed after a really big rainstorm your local creek is moving really fast, but it's also that really yucky brown color? It's because it's picked up a lot of soil from construction sites and places along the banks where the soil is eroding, and they've taken it up into the waterway. And that's not good for us or wastewater treatment plants or the fish and the other wildlife that are already existing in that creek or river. Then, of course, there are the less obvious pollutants that make their way into the waterway. So obviously we have things like trash and litter, but things like oil from leaky cars and other chemicals that have accidentally been spilled are making their way and being picked up by that runoff into our watershed. So while accidents happen, we do want to make sure that we take precautions, because the things that we do in our own neighborhoods and on our own properties can really influence water quality and the health of the watershed as a whole. So how can we limit this water runoff? Some of the ways that Durham Soil and Water helps people with this is by helping and encouraging people and places of business to install rain gardens to help absorb and filter rainfall, to harvest rainwater by using rain barrels or cisterns to conserve water, by encouraging the limitations of impermeable surfaces or solid surfaces that rain can't seep off of. And then, of course, encouraging those permeable surfaces, so surfaces that water can soak through, like gravel. We obviously want to avoid dumping trash or using a lot of pollutants on our properties. In order to prevent this, we encourage people to use native and low-maintenance gardens that require fewer chemicals to maintain, like exotic gardens may. And then a less obvious way is to reduce waste by starting a compost bin. By making sure that the soil on your property is healthy, we encourage the properties of soil that help absorb the water and filter out pollutants. So what watershed do you live in? In order to find out what watershed you live in, make sure to ask an adult before looking up a map to find your closest creek. Then with that information, you can go to Durham's watersheds on Durham County Government's website to look up a map of what watershed you live in. Here is the watershed, Ellerby Creek watershed, that we at Durham Soil and Water stay in. So what's next? What can you do with all of this information? Well, Durham Soil and Water is having conservation contests right now. We've got conservation contests for grades 3 through 9. We've got traditional poster contests, essay and slideshow contests, public speaking, and graphic poster design. You can check out the rules and prizes on our website, as well as request any additional lesson planning. We hope that you guys feel encouraged to participate in our We All Live in a Watershed contest, and we hope to hear from you soon.